Hey guys, this is Jeff Kamke with Wealth Energetics, and in this video today, I want to talk about the key 5 retirement risks that a lot of people have never even heard about. Their advisor isn't helping them make sure that they're managing those risks. And I want to talk a little bit about efficiency as it comes to retirement planning and just overall financial strategy planning that just often gets neglected. As I work with people, I see this time and time and time again. High net worth people, people that are making 6, 7 figures, entrepreneurs, business owners, and then of course, the more normal W-2 employees. There's a lot of things that people think that they've got perfect. They've got their plan in place. Everything's the way it should be. They're following everything by the book, and then it comes down to it, and they just have missed some key things. And I want to make sure that you're educated to know what these things are so you can create a plan and strategy to make sure that you don't encounter problems when you're needing money in retirement or you're needing your stock portfolio, you're needing the money that you've put away, and something happens that you didn't foresee coming, a risk that's there that nobody educated you about, nobody helped you plan for years before it came. And now you're in the moment where, oh crap, this has happened. I didn't know this was going to happen. I didn't plan for this. And now what do I do? We want to avoid that, right? So let's go into the 5 key retirement risks. There's market risk, there's inflation risk, there's long-term care or longevity risk, there's interest rate risk, and there's tax risk. So let's break these down and keep them fairly simple. We'll do other content that goes into these in much more longer form, but I want to keep this brief so you're at least educated on these main things and have an idea of what they are and what you can be doing about them. So let's look at market risk. So market risk is the idea that as you're coming into retirement or your first few years of retirement, the stock market goes down. Most people are planning for their 401k or their investment funds to be spinning off income when you get into retirement. They're going to live on the interest that their pile of money, their nest egg is going to spin off. Now, what happens if you've got that $1 million portfolio that Dave Ramsey and the like love to tout? If you get that $1 million portfolio, you're a millionaire on paper. You should feel good about yourself. And in many ways, you should. But let's make sure that we're not at risk of something major happening. If there's a stock market correction in the years leading up to retirement or in the years that you're in retirement and you're needing that money for income, what happens if you're pulling out 30 or $40,000 a year, which is the recommended safe withdrawal rate of $1 million, pulling anywhere from 2 to 4% is the way that you can ensure that you'll never run out of money. Hopefully, you already know that. If not, that's definitely a key piece. But what happens if you're pulling that 30, $40,000 a year, but the market also goes down 10, 20, 30% that exact same year? That is a double dip where you're pulling income and the value of your account is going down at the same time. That is harder to recover from, and that increases a lot of risk into your portfolio where you may run out of money prematurely because on average every 7 years the markets are up and every 3 years the markets are down. Now we never know which seven or which three. Are they going to go back to back? Are they going to be, two up and one down? We never know, of course. So that's why we need to be thinking ahead, planning for these risks so that they don't happen. So the main key risk avoidance technique that we love to teach is something called a volatility buffer. So it is a secondary place where you have money stored that during the down year or the year following a down year in the market, you're not pulling money from your stock market portfolio. Because think about it, the balance just dropped by 10, 20, 30%. You don't want to be taking money out of that because you're locking in the losses at a lower share price, correct? So, in order to not do that, we want to have a secondary place that we pull money from. Now, it could be something as simple as a money market account where you're still earning a little bit of interest on it, but it's liquid, it's relatively secure. We love to look at it as more of something we are putting in whole life insurance and using cash value permanent dividend paying life insurance is a great volatility buffer because you're getting guaranteed growth out of it. And you can also do a myriad of other things. If you've watched other content on this channel, you'll know all about those. If you don't know about those, certainly go and watch some of the other content around this valuable foundational asset where you've got 2 to 3 years of your living expenses in the cash value, and it serves as a volatility buffer. Now, what does that do for you in retirement and for your income in retirement you're pulling? It can allow you to take much more than 2 to 4% of the safe withdrawal rate. If you're factoring in for that buffer strategy, that volatility buffer, the Monte Carlo simulations that have been done, not by me, but by the industry, that proves how powerful of strategy this is. You can begin taking Some will say 6%, some will say even up to 8% per year out of your retirement portfolio without running the risk of running out of money during a 30-year retirement. So that is significant. Now, you'd want to be talking to an advisor and making sure of that math and doing all those things to be, for sure. But what it is going to do is allow you to not lock in the losses during your those down years in your retirement account, allow them to come back before you pull money out of there if you've got the secondary source that you're able to pull income from. So that's very, very powerful in a way to help overcome the market risk that we encounter in retirement. Now, the second retirement risk is inflation risk. So the devaluation of our currency is something that is a very interesting thing. As I was younger, I didn't quite understand it. Now that I've been in finance for all the years that I've been in it, it's this almost this illusion of expansion that everything is going up in value. We feel like everything is expanding when it's actually contracting. The value of our currency is going down at such a rapid pace. That's why vehicles, I think back to my first diesel pickup that I bought in 2005 when I had my lawn and landscaping business when I was just out of high school. And it costs around $35,000 for a four-door, four-wheel drive diesel pickup. That same pickup today is not 35,000. It's doubled, if not more, to $70,000. So it's not that everything is expanding, it's that the value of our currency is shrinking because we're pumping the supply of money into the currency or into the supply, the currency into the supply. And that devalues it because we're no longer gold backed. So, what strategies can you employ to make sure that you're helping to offset the inflation risk? Now, when inflation is so high, like we've seen the last 4 or 5 years, it's hard to have our money keep pace with that unless you're getting crazy good returns in investment or you're a day trader or stock trader where you know how to, really make good returns. But outside of that, the best ways to offset inflation risk are, of course, minimizing your losses when you do have a portion of your portfolio in the stock market. But you also need to think about when we're talking about retirement specifically, what ways can we ensure that our income that we're getting in retirement is going to keep pace the best we can with inflation? Now, a lot of times this happens during or inside of a annuity where we have an inflation rider, a cost of living rider on that annuity where we're going to set that at maybe 2%, 2.5% to where every year you're getting money out of that annuity, it's going to keep pace with inflation. Now, typically your Social Security, when people are relying on, hopefully it's a portion of their retirement from Social Security. For some people, it may be all if they're a lower income, that their Social Security is going to keep pace with inflation. There's usually cost of living riders or not riders, but cost of living calculations built into that to where it's going to go up. I know in 2025 it was at 2.5% this year for the cost of living adjustment that was made. So you've got those things there. But then the other side of it is, obviously you want to still have your portfolio, the portion of it that can grow, you still want that to be growing and hopefully growing at a pace ahead of inflation. So maybe that's a quarter, a third, or half of your overall portfolio, depending on what that strategy looks like, to where you're still growing your money, where you're having it managed by someone that can really understand the situation that we're in economically, the presidential, decisions and the viewpoints that they have and what industries are going to be best suited to be investing with to minimize your downside to where your money is going to be growing. Those are a couple great strategies to offset inflation risk. Now, the third one is longevity risk, which this is something that, the older you get, if you're 50, 55 or older, something you might want to consider looking into. This is longevity. This is talking about our health, where the older we get, we live in a society, unfortunately, here in America, where a lot of people's health begins to deteriorate once they get into their 60s and 70s and 80s. And the need for an extended or a higher level of care comes into play when we have chronic and degenerative diseases or terminal illnesses and things like this, to where we need nursing home or we need in-home care. How are you going to pay for that? The traditional financial planning model says that our huge nest egg of our investment portfolio is going to serve that purpose on top of a death benefit or a legacy play for our children. It's going to be the income we need in retirement. It's going to do all these things. And that typically is not the most efficient way to go about it. To be relying on our stock portfolio to do all of those things and expect we won't run out of money. And, it's essentially looking at that pile of money and saying, I need everything that pile of money is going to do for for dollar basis. If I need $1 of long-term care, I have to dip into my portfolio. And actually, it's not $1 for dollar with that, because if it's pre-tax, you're probably actually going to spend $1.30 to get $1 of coverage. of actual long-term care type needs. So that's not efficient. So what is efficient is having a long-term care policy, or at least bare minimum, having the living benefits rider on some form of life insurance. Now, it could be term, it's ideal, it's whole life, could be universal life. There's some guaranteed universal life products out there that might make sense with. But that is the ideal way, is to handle that through life insurance partially or more fully using some of the best products out there that also offer a death benefit along with the long-term care coverage, where you're paying pennies on the dollar for dollars of coverage. That is usually the most efficient way to handle that risk as we get into retirement, when those needs come up for chronic, critical, or terminal illness. Those kind of things, can be sometimes short term, but they can also be long term. My great grandmother was in a nursing home for 16 years. Now she was on, the government, care of all that, but some people don't want to do that. They want to handle that themselves, which gives you more power and control over what you're doing instead of just whatever the government is, allowing you to do. And so that is a way to handle the longevity risk. Now, the fourth risk is interest rate risk. So if interest rates change, that can affect the performance of bonds, which are traditionally the safe place we have our money parked. We usually have a portion in the stock market, usually about 60%, most gurus recommend, and 40% in bonds. Now, bonds have been shown last few years to actually decrease in value. So as interest rates change, that can affect bond performance. So we want a way to offset that potential risk, which a great strategy to offset the bond risk is not being invested directly into bonds, but using the type of companies that actually are using bonds for their investments, but that have a long track record of being profitable. And I'm talking over 100 years, 140 years, some of them. And that would be whole life insurance companies having a portion or all of the allocation you normally have in bonds, having it in whole life because they're invested in bonds. And so you're actually giving yourself an extra layer of buffer, because traditionally whole life insurance companies know how to be profitable long term, and you're not going to be subject to, if interest rates change and bonds go down in value, having that safe portion of your portfolio being negatively affected. So that can be a great strategy to look at that, see what that looks like in your portfolio as a way to offset that risk that normally the safe bond is going to pose as a risk in your portfolio and the overall performance of it. And then the fifth risk in retirement is taxation. Now, do you think taxes are going to go up in the future? I think most people that I talk to and ask that question to, they say, yeah, they're probably going to go up. We've got to handle all the debt and all of the printing of money and all this stuff. We've got to handle that through raising of taxes. And as the government traditionally is not very efficient, they're not very good with managing money or handling money or making good decisions around money, more than likely they're going to take more and more from the citizens to pay for all the things that they're wanting to, implement, all the programs and all the different things. So in order to handle tax risk, we want to start managing the tax situation as early as possible, which means having our money growing with after-tax dollars and doing things as we enter the retirement phase, where we're maybe doing some Roth conversions over a number of years, if that makes sense. There's a lot of strategies that we can do. Now, utilizing Roth accounts to grow our money is great. Having money in instruments like whole life insurance, where some of that money in your overall portfolio is growing in a tax-free environment, that can be very powerful, because what we don't want to have you do is avoid paying taxes today in a lower tax rate environment to pay them in 10 or 20 years when you want the money out at a higher tax rate. That is not efficient. That is not really smart mathematically or financially, right? That is a decision that is going to cost you more down the road than it would be today if we believe that taxes are going to go up. So that is a consideration you want to make of, what is my tax situation? How can I be more tax efficient when it comes to retirement planning and in the retirement stage? Ideally, the perfect scenario is you have no money that's being taxed once you're in retirement. That way, that risk is completely off the table. You're dealing with money that's growing and that has grown that you've already paid taxes on. And that is a risk that's already been taken care of. That is an ideal scenario. And we want to get as close to that as possible, ideally, so that you're not having tax risk come into play. So that is the main 5 areas when we're talking about retirement, the 5 risks that we can encounter, and some simple strategies to help negate those or minimize those, because we always want to be using risk mitigation strategies to where we're putting the risk that's normally on us and putting it somewhere else, whether that's on an insurance company, through annuities or life insurance, or just being smart with how we're managing our money so that we're minimizing risks of loss and other aspects that come up so that our strategy in retirement is as rock solid as it can be, where we have confidence, we have control, we have accessibility to it, and it's doing what we need it to do. So in all of that, we've talked a little bit about efficiency, and that efficiency piece is often overlooked, where one of the moves that we can make, to help in retirement can be, looking at that volatility buffer that we talked about is the very first risk, which was the market risk. And that volatility buffer, if we have it in whole life, it can also serve as the legacy play where we're giving money to our kids and grandkids, which that is an efficient way to go about it, where we're putting $1 into an instrument and getting two or three different benefits from that same instrument. That is more efficient than having to put $1 in to one instrument to get a benefit, put a second dollar into a second instrument for a second benefit, and a third dollar into a third instrument for a third benefit. We want to be doing things more efficiently and allow our money to go further. And so there's a lot of strategies. I'm not going to go into all of them, obviously, in this video. I want to keep it short, but there's so many ways as we look at a financial strategy to be getting our money to go further. And if we're looking for certain income needs in retirement, there's different tools out there that allow us to take a lot of times, instead of needing $1 million of overall income, we might have, might be able to pull the same amount of income from $700,000, but we're getting the same amount of income in retirement out of that instrument. So those are key things that you want to consider. And if you don't have anybody that's ever looked at the efficiency of your overall portfolio, of your strategy, and they've never talked to you about the 5 risks that we just went over, that is something you need to take a serious look at and make sure that as you're in your 40s and 50s, you're planning for these things, you're setting yourself up for efficiency and managing all those risks come retirement, even though it feels like a long way off, the time to really strategize about that is now. And the cool thing is a lot of the strategies that we're talking about can actually benefit you earlier in life. Things like the whole life. There's so many ways that it can benefit you. It's really the most flexible asset that can go with you literally your entire life and serve purposes all through your life, help reduce or mitigate risk all the way through your life, and allow you to amplify what you're doing with your money, whether that's in your business, your personal finances. So those are some examples of efficiencies that we want you to be thinking about. And if you don't know where to go, then that's a great opportunity to click the link with this video, schedule some time with me, book a clarity call and a strategy call, and we can go over your situation and see, what we can do to help you understand these things and how it apply to your situation and some ways that we can implement some very specific strategies for you that are customized for you that will help you mitigate these risks, be more efficient with your money, and help you reach your goals that you have, whether that's in your business, in your family, for retirement. And so hopefully that answers some questions, give you some clarity on this retirement window, the risks, and how efficiency is so important as we look at this to make sure that the money that you've worked hard for and that you continue to earn is going as far as possible. So if you need that help, click that link in the description here, and I look forward to talking with you on a clarity call. Take care.